Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hey everybody, today on the show I've got some call-ins from some other Anchor podcasters. Embedded in my response to Karl Rodriguez is a recap of our latest Dungeon Crawl Classics game, Echoes of Fomalhaut, and an update on what's going on there. But I'm going to start off with a recap of my 5th edition Storm King's Thunder game. So let's get into that first. So we're nearing the end. We had our next to last, I think, session. The big final battle is coming up here in a couple of weeks, but how we ended this last time is previously they had found that the Kraken Society had been involved in the disappearance of King Hekaton, the king of the Storm Giants. They got a confession from a person and a nobleman in Yartar about the whole thing. As he was in the middle of telling him everything, he had some kind of massive seizure and died, some kind of psychic attack. But they got enough information to kind of have an idea of where to look, way off the Sword Coast, out in the vicinity of some small islands called the Purple Rocks. They know to go out there, so they're able to look at a map and figure out where they're going to go. But as they were going to their ship, the dragon cultists who had been assisting them turned on them. They managed to kill all of them, except they spared the captain and sort of pressed him into service to continue flying the ship for him. And he'd explained that, when you guys were fighting giants, his patron, who was a red dragon, was happy to help them. But now that they seem to be working on behalf of restoring the ordning and putting giants back in the proper order, that's not good for the evil dragons of Faerun, and so he was ordered to turn on them. Of course, that didn't work. So they fly. They make their preparations. They fly out. It takes them a couple days to get that far out, to cross the continent and then out onto the ocean. And just as they spot the ship, they see it. They can see it down in the vicinity of these small islands. Through one of the captain's spyglass, they can see actually close enough to see that in the cargo hold of the ship, which is open to the sky, and they can see kind of in the distance the form of a storm giant laying down in there. So they think they've got there, but just as they are about to figure out how to make an approach, they hear thunder and lightning, and a blue dragon comes up beside them, catches up and comes up beside him, and it's Imrith, the blue dragon, who's kind of orchestrated this entire plot. And she breathes at the ship with her lightning breath and blasts a hole right in the middle. Half of them are below decks and half of them are above decks. So, and then she moves to close in on the ship. Well, a little bit of backstory. I don't know, you may or may not remember, quite a while back when they were they had approached a retired adventurer who one of their Harper allies had said, "This is a guy I used to adventure with. He has a giant slaying weapon that he might give you, given that you're about to take on some fire giants." They go to this guy's keep, and he doesn't have a sword. His son has absconded with his sword and gone out into the troll moors to kind of make a name for himself and never come back. So they had gone and found this kid, and I think I had done this in a previous recap, and it was too late. He'd been killed. They fought through some trolls, and they found a cave full of ghouls and zombies, including the animated corpse of this kid and some of his comrades that had gone with him, but also found some sort of, necromantic altar or shrine, and they destroyed it, but there was a skull on top of it. And Kalmar, who is a paladin warlock multiclass, but his patron is Orcus. He's not evil, but his patron is Orcus. What his backstory is, he was a paladin, and he was fighting an incursion from the abyss, and he wound up in the abyss and was about to die, and he sort of, called out to anyone who's listening for help, and Orcus responded and said, I'll make a deal with you. You become a warlock for me, and I'll send you back home. And he's been trying to figure out how to get out from under this pact with Orcus. Well, Orcus at that point said, take the skull. And on the voyage out, as they were headed to the Purple Rocks, and he had a dream where he felt that Orcus was telling him, I will release you of all obligations if you do one thing. Hurl that skull at Imerith the next time you see her. And so here's Imerith off the off the bow of the ship. She's just blown a hole in it, and she's closing in. She latches onto the side of the ship. All but one character failed their check against their save against the dragon fear. So they all had to push back to the back of the ship. No one, only the dwarf cleric, Halfgrim, succeeded, and then the goblin barbarian was already at the rails when she showed up. So he didn't have to back away, but he couldn't get any closer, but she was already right there. So they were the only ones that could really do anything up close. Everybody could continue to make ranged attacks with disadvantage. So she really, they didn't, if the fight had gone on, she would have torn the ship apart. But Calmer throws the skull and misses, and he can't approach her now because he's subject to dragon fear. Can't approach her to pick it up, but Halfgrim and Dor, who kind of saw what he did, and he's like, hit her with the skull. Dor picks up the skull and smashes her with it, smashes it into her, and she reels and lets go of the ship, and they see this necrotic, sickly green energy starting to swirl around her, and as she flies off, they can see that scales are falling off and her skin is withering up. And what has just happened is Orcus has tricked Calmer into turning Imerith into a Dracolich, which they are going to have to deal with in the final session. So I pulled a nice little evil trick that is not part of Storm King's Thunder. I did that all on my own, partially just because I thought it would be cool. I needed a way to resolve Calmer's story arc and get him free of Orcus. And also, these guys are pretty powerful, and I want to make sure that Imerith presents a challenge to them when they finally face her. So that was a good power up for her in terms of deadliness, I thought. So she flies off back towards the mainland, and they're able to then, they've got a hole in the side of their airship, but it's like a gondola attached to a big balloon, so it's not like they can still use it. So, of course, as they descend to the ship where Hecaton is being held captive, there's no chance of just dropping out of the sky and surprise or coming from a blind angle or anything like that, because the entire crew of the ship has just witnessed them fighting a dragon in the sky. But they make their descent, and they can stay high enough that they're out of the range of the ballista that are on this ship and can get vertically above it. And so they decide they're just going to drop their own ballista bolts down over the edge and just bomb the crew of this, at least the ones on the top deck of the ship. And they do a pretty good job. They force all of them to flee. They notice that there's there's a half-orc at the helm, and then various cultists are also crew members. But these aren't Cult of the Dragon. These are the Kraken Society. But they force them all to flee below decks to get away from the ballista, and that allows them to lower themselves down onto the ship. And so they lower themselves down onto the deck of the ship and fight their way down to the hold. About half of them get caught just dealing with this, just 2 or 3 Kraken Society sailors just keep coming out of the crew cabin. They kill one and another one takes its place. So some of them are still stuck kind of on the top deck for most of the fight, trying to get down below. But Calmer and Dor manage to jump down and get down into the hold where Hecaton is. And then 4 Marrow show up. These large Marrow in previous editions, I think, were aquatic trolls or a different kind of creature in 5th edition. But they're these really, they kind of pop up on the surface of the ocean. They've got these harpoons with kelp ropes, and they manage to skewer Halfgrim and Calder, the Fey Warlock, and start to try to drag him over the rails. And then there's this battle of strength checks going back and forth as they're trying to get themselves free. Kane is able to cut the kelp rope that's got the Warlock pinned up. Halfgrim almost gets drug over the side after he gets harpoons caught in his armor. But he thinks, oh, what spell can he use? And he's got Circle of Fire, but you can't cast it on water. It has to be on a solid surface. But the player's pretty clever in that one, as he casts it on the side of the ship. And it shoots out enough to burn the rope and also singe the marrow. And I think he actually killed it. But they managed to kill that one and another marrow on the surface. But two more climb over the railings and drop down to where Hecaton is. So Calder, the Phalok, pulls one of his favorite tricks. He polymorphs into a giant ape and jumps down and just goes King Kong on him. So they're still fighting with cultists. The captain of the ship, who is a wizard, comes out. He hits all of them with like a cone of cold, and then backs into his cabin. Door runs and jumps up through the door of his cabin and attacks him a little bit, and then backs out to continue fighting with the sailors and the marrow and everything that are now accumulating in the hold of this ship. The wizard comes out the door again to fight, and the giant ape just grabs him, and there's no way a wizard is going to win an opposed strength check on a giant ape. So just grabs him and just flings him over the side of the ship out into the ocean. And so that was funny, a little anticlimactic, because that wizard could have done he was packing some serious heat in terms of his spells, but they neutralized him in a pretty comical way. And then the great ape, he just pummels the other marrow to death. So they managed to take over the ship, get rid of the marrow, get rid of the crew. Hecaton is bound in these magic chains. He's not bolted to the bottom of the hold. He's just bound in these chains, which makes him immovable and immobile, and he's in some sort of suspended state of animation. So they figure out how they can use magical weapons to hack through the chains. So they start hacking through the chains. He wakes up. He's furious. He sees small folk around and thinks, these are the people who betrayed me and have held him captive, and I don't know what's been going on. Well, they managed to persuade him. We're here to help. We came on behalf of your daughter. We've been trying to find you, and they talk him down. So he agrees. Okay, thank you. We need to get back to the Maelstrom, his castle. Anyway, but he gives them time to kind of search the ship for any kind of loot. They get some nice some gold and a little more treasure, and then but they feel the ship starting to rock, and these large, huge tentacles appear out of the ocean, start grabbing the ship from different directions and starting to pull it apart and pull it under. And they realize that this is a Kraken, as they had, I think one of them had ordered earlier, one of the sailors to surrender. And he said, the great Sharkathal shall drag you to your death in the depths. And so this is the Kraken that the Kraken Society serves. But they do have the conch that teleports them back to the Storm Giants' castle whenever they want. So they all, bunch up together and blow the horn and get back to the Storm Giants' castle. And that's where we left off. So when we pick up next time, we'll kind of see Hecaton restored to his throne, and they'll gear up, and then we'll see what they're going to do about finally putting an end to the now undead Imrith, the Doom of the Desert. And that will be the end of that campaign. Looking at what we're going to do next, I'm going to be going and doing Temple of Elemental Evil. Goodman Games has put out a 5th edition conversion in their series of original adventures reincarnated, the Temple of Elemental Evil. So I think we're going to do that. So we got one more Storm King's Thunder and then an all-new crew of first-level characters. And we'll be putting Forgotten Realms behind us for a while and going to Greyhawk. So I'll provide another recap when we do our last Storm King's Thunder session here in a couple of weeks. So here we've got a call from Karl Rodriguez talking about using henchmen and hirelings and allies during gaming, and he's going to start off talking about how we've used them in our Dungeon Crawl Classics game, which I really didn't mention last time that we have a couple of supernatural allies that have sort of aligned with us that we basically used kind of off screen to prevent all of the hags, little minion plant creatures from coming in from the battlements. Once we got into the final battle with the hag in the last DCC game, so he's talking a little bit about that, but then goes into a little more detail on the general concept of allies, hirelings, henchmen. So let's hear what Karl has to say.
Hey, BJ, thanks for the recap. I think it was really an epic session. And I think something that what I thought has been cool in this adventure is y'all's accumulation of allies. You mentioned the cat Jinx, but then there is also the demon skull. I think it's called the Guardian. And then there's like the ghostly seneschal, who's a specter, who, you know, I don't know. It's just a fun thing to do, and I love the reaction roll mechanic. And sometimes it totally sucks, and sometimes it's totally cool, but it kind of gives you a feel for how the interaction's going to go. And what I've liked about the setup of this adventure, what's in this adventure, is the chance to accumulate these allies. And the Guardian and the Seneschal, they kind of killed a lot of minions for you guys while you fought the hag. And I guess as a side note, that's one of the coolest things that I've felt about games recently is this sort of faction play. And for not just in DCC, maybe I just have a thing for faction play, who knows. But in Warhammer Fantasy, they've made allies with, the heroes have made allies with Kemperbad, and now have even had their barge, their river barge, commissioned, you know, as privateers for Kemperbad. And then in Twilight 2000, I mean, the accumulation of allies and playing the factions has really benefited the players extremely well. They assaulted a marauder hideout, and without the allies, it would have been rough. But with the accumulation of allies, they didn't roll them over, but it was a pretty good ass whooping on this marauder. And maybe that shows to me that the world is rich and alive, and yes, the players are the heroes, but they're making a name for themselves. They're gathering those allies that stand behind them and raise the flag, you know, in victory, usually so far. So I think it's a neat thing that, again, like I said, I've been enjoying in my games recently, and I hope it continues in other games that we may do. I mean, Hyperborea too. Shoot, man, you guys were good at getting henchmen and hirelings, I thought. So, fun stuff. I guess it's my jam. Henchmen, allies, that random reaction roll, you know, the good old things from that BX game that has been transported forward to other games.
Thanks, Karl. Yeah, I think we have made pretty good use of our allies and henchmen and the like in both the DCC and the Hyperborea games I've played in. I enjoy that aspect of the game a lot more than I didn't really. It's been so long since I played original D&D. I think the first game I played when I was like a teenager, we had like henchmen or retainers or something, and then we never really played with them until I started running Old School Essentials about a year ago. It's kind of an oft overlooked and really cool part of the game, and I enjoy that aspect of play. So I'm in agreement with you on that. I'm going to go ahead and give a recap of our last DCC, which kind of just follows from what we talked about. We've played once more since then, and we're now clearing the castle. We've defeated the hag. We explored the remainder of the castle. don't think we've uncovered the whole thing, so we've got one more maybe session coming up to finally finish it out. But one of the things we did find was we found a room with a kind of a thief or type character in the room who was being real dodgy and sketchy about how he got there, and he finally pointed to a door in the wall that he had come through, and so Ardath, the fighter, who is played by Arlen Walker, decided he got a rope and tied it around his waist and went through the portal and wound up in some kind of inn in another world, but the process of passing through cut the rope, but he was able to come back through to our side again. So we found another portal to some other place. So there are portals to several places in the castle, but also the one that we initially came through out in the forest nearby. So this may be, I don't know if this is some sort of multiversal crossroads that we've found ourselves in, but that being said, we continue to explore some more. We encountered this guy was just not straight with us and continued to try. He was just being really untrustworthy and always, we were trying to get him to, hey man, play ball with us and we'll take care of you and, we'll help you get back home. But he just kept being a little sneaky and dodgy. And so finally, the seneschal of the castle, who is I believe he's either a wraith or a shadow. I can't know what he is. He finally turned the guy into a thrall. So the poor guy got turned into an undead thrall. Anyway, we also encountered a room with a couple of mummies, which was kind of the big battle for the night. We held our own. Took some damage, but we managed to defeat them with some back and forth. The guy had to do a bit of healing and stuff as the cleric to do that. But we defeated these two mummies and found some armor and a sword. And in Dungeon Crawl Classics, neutral clerics can use swords. So I managed to get a hold of this magic sword that seems to have its own intelligence and its own ego, and it can its purpose is to reward those who to reward the ambitious at all costs. That's its purpose. So it's a sword that's a warrior bane. It can detect warriors. It can dispel magic. It communicates with kind of it's not got a high enough intelligence to communicate in words, but it does and kind of urges to indicate what it wants to do. So it may be a little more chaotic than I would normally wield as an intelligent weapon, but given that I've got a fighter in Ardath or a warrior in Ardath in the party who's pretty ambitious, I think as long as I keep him up on his feet and pursuing his goals, that may appease the spirit of this sword so that I can continue to wield it. Everybody kind of agreed too that I should be the new lord of this castle. So I'm thinking what Bernfried will do as a cleric is possibly try to solve the puzzle, since he's a cleric of the god of puzzles and mysteries. Solve the puzzle of why we have all these portals going to different places here and where they all go. And that seems like it would be a neat place to consecrate to that kind of a deity, to continue to, again, there's some ambition there. There's some things in line with the portfolio of the deity that I serve. And maybe I can figure out how to get my skin turned back normal, because right now it's translucent and I gotta wrap myself up. I thought maybe having to wrap from head to toe in a cloak and cloths to keep the sun from shining directly on my skin, I might wind up looking a little bit like Moon Knight. Not the classic comic book version of Moon Knight, but if you've seen the kind of the way they've styled his costume for the upcoming Disney Plus live action show, where it looks a little bit like mummy wraps, a little bit of an Egyptian theme, that maybe Bernfried will wind up looking like him and have some kind of stylized mask until he can show his own face again. So that's kind of where I'm thinking we'll go, as long as everybody else is willing to go along with that and we continue to get along as a party. But that was a lot of fun, and that's kind of where we left off with our last DC. I know Jason's character, Idris Khan, the wizard or the magician, wants to get back to his home in the desert. This is a lush, verdant world, and so I think he's getting kind of antsy. He went through the tapestry where you can go in and speak to a sage, and the sage kind of gave him some riddled answers that made it seem like the portal he came through is the way he needs to go back. Of course, that's broken. We don't know how to activate it, but that may be a mystery we can solve to try to keep him engaged and working with the rest of the party. Jason does a really good job of role-playing that character. So anyway, that is the latest on Dungeon Crawl Classics and the Echoes of Fomalhaut. Okay, now we got a couple calls. First from Joe Richter of the Hindsightless podcast, and then from Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, talking a little bit about guns and black powder weapons in Dungeons and Dragons. But then Jason's also got a comment about superheroes. So let's hear what they have to say.
Hey there, BJ. Awesome episode talking about the great Cyclops of the mythic world of Erd. That was amazing. Like I've said before, I love your lore episodes. I think they're great. Yeah, you mentioned guns and D&D and black powder and stuff, and apparently this is one of the few, though not only, things that Gary and I agree on. I'm not a fan of guns in my fantasy. I don't like it. There's enough guns in the real world. But I do love the idea of a half ogre with a big arquebus. That sounds dope. So I hope you guys do use black powder in your game, because when Jason mentioned that, I was like, dude, that sounds awesome. Anyway, man, take it easy. Peace out.
Hey, BJ, Jason here. Yeah, I've got all the books on PDF for OSC and Advanced OSC. I don't have the Karen Crawlers, I don't think, so I'm not sure exactly the black powder rules used. You might have linked them, and I haven't looked at them yet. But to me, black powder needs to be... you can't reload it during a fight. It's just not realistic, right? So, unless your character's just sitting back for multiple rounds, not doing anything. But for the most part, they're shocking all at the beginning of the battle. And then, of course, you have the negatives. They might not go off. Maybe they'll explode on a small chance. But because of the noise, they might also attract more monsters, right? So, there's... Anytime you use black powder weapons, there's ought to be a pretty good chance of attracting anything else in the area. But no, I'm definitely looking forward to that game. And I wouldn't really worry about what Gary did, because it's your world, not his. You mentioned DC Comics and all. One thing that's been rattling around in my head that I would like to either run or play in, either one, would be doing something with the Legion of Superheroes. I really like those comics. The Legion of Superheroes were a lot of fun. I mean, they've gone through a bunch of different iterations, but, the idea you have this group of young heroes, and they each normally have one power. There are a couple people that have different, multiple powers, but for the most part, they have one power each, unique power, and the Legion of Superheroes really lends itself to random character creation, like in the old Marvel Superheroes game or something, depending what you get for a power, like Matter Eater Lad, who can just eat anything, and you got to, anyway, but you get these characters with these oddball powers, you got to figure out how to use them, and I just think that'd be a lot of fun, especially because you're doing it in a sci-fi game. So anyhow, take care.
Hey, Joe, I can understand where you're coming from on that. Although I think it's funny that you're kind of our resident Pathfinder guy, and I think Pathfinder's probably responsible for sort of a renewed interest in having guns in fantasy role-playing games. Of course, Pathfinder has the Gunslinger class, but of course the Gunslinger class was the original Critical Role. The character of Percy was a gunslinger when they started the campaign in Pathfinder, but then when they switched to D&D, Matt Mercer created a custom fighter archetype so he could continue to be a gunslinger in D&D. And then Critical Role took off among D&D fandom, and that I think got us a renewed interest in guns in our fantasy. So anyway, but I do understand where you're coming from on that. It's not for everybody. And for a long time, I didn't want it in fantasy either. And I think it depends on the type of fantasy as well. I certainly wouldn't want to include it in anything that was trying to evoke Dark Ages or the Bronze Age or anything like that. But when you get into something that's a little more like the late Renaissance, I think it fits well. Of course, then maybe you ought to start adjusting your available weapons and armor so it reflects a little more of the period. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Joe, for that call. And Jason, also thank you for the call. Yeah, I think we'll find the rules that'll fit for us. I think the ones that Gavin Norman wrote for Old School Essentials will work just fine. We might tweak a couple things here or there just to taste, but I think that for the most part they work pretty well. It's funny you mentioned Matter Eater Lad. I don't know if you've been watching Peacemaker on HBO, but he frequently will throw in little comments to his team about different superheroes he's met or teamed up with, and he mentions teaming up with Matter Eater Lad. It's kind of funny because they kind of make fun of his powers there in that scene. But I think Legion of Superheroes, that style is probably a good fit for a role playing game because it's kind of wide open. It's a really large team that they have a wide variety of powers, and I think you could use that as inspiration for having a wide and varied array of types of superheroes that could still all be part of a common campaign and be on one team. So I think it's a very good call. Maybe we should try to do that sometime in the future. And finally, we have a call from Collin Green of the Spike Pit podcast and YouTube channel. So let's hear what Collin has to say.
Hi, BJ. This is an off-the-record call-in because I haven't got anything particularly sensible or constructive to say, but I wanted to let you know I'm listening in, really enjoying the episodes, and keep on plugging away. That's my bit of a nervous laugh there. Did you catch that? Teaching, it's brutal, and I'm finding it quite taxing. So hopefully you continue to listen to the show. I was wondering if you'd listen to the Curse of Strahd at all, and whether that's worth doing. It would be super useful to hear, off the record or not. Anyway, take care. Catch you later, mate.
Yeah, Colin, that nervous laughter is infectious, apparently. Hey, man, I know teaching can be taxing. I don't know how directly it compares to in the UK as it does to the US, but I've got tons of relatives and friends who are teachers here, so I know what they put into the profession to help the kids and do a good job. So, but hang in there, man. It's a worthy cause, and I hope it continues to be rewarding for you. Regarding your Curse of Strahd episodes, I have been listening. I've been enjoying them very much. So I say keep it up. That's my vote. And everybody, if you haven't been listening to Spike Pit, Colin has been putting out around 30-minute excerpts of him playing through Curse of Strahd with his family. I think his brother and his son are also playing in the game with him. And it's a lot of fun to listen to them. They do a really good job of role playing their characters, and I think they've been through 2 or 3 encounters and only had maybe. Have you guys even had a fight yet? I mean, it's very much role playing, interacting with the NPCs, and sort of finding other solutions to problems at this point. So, I am enjoying those, Colin. So I hope you keep doing them, and I'll keep listening. Take care. And that's going to do it. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. I want to once again thank my callers, Collin Green of the Spike Pit, Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Karl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents, and Joe Richter of Hindsightless. Be sure and check out their podcasts. Always good stuff from them. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll be back later. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art I use for the episodes is by Dave Bone. Be sure and check out his website, ironseer.com, for a lot of other great gaming-related content. You can always leave me a voice message through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website, or you can email me at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Once again, I appreciate you listening. Thanks so much.